So this is my first time using this tool, so I'm kind of like not used to having something in my hand. Sorry for that. Welcome to my talk. Today we're going to talk about when the threat actor lives under your roof. So how can we fight technological violence, especially in case of domestic abuse case. So it's been mentioned, my name is Catherine Dupont-Gagnon. I teach at Polytechnique. I'm the co-founder of the association called Cybersecurity. We have a podcast where we discuss cybersecurity, privacy, and all things tech. We also help victims of cybercrime and provide support. And essentially the talk that I'm going to be presenting today is about the kind of help we've been providing to victims of domestic violence. The goal that I have today is to raise awareness on this very important issues that's been growing in recent years so that we can sort of engage the cybersecurity community into getting involved and maybe helping. Some warning before we start. Usually this is an hour-long talk, actually 90 minutes sometimes. It is a sensitive subject that does require a lot of nuance that I'm not going to have the luxury of spending a lot of time on today. So please forgive any kind of like shortcuts I'm going to be taking at some points. Second warning, the case that I'm going to be presenting have been slightly changed and edited to protect the victim. Of course, they have given consent, but still we have changed some details just so they cannot be identified. And in case the accent didn't give it away, I'm sorry if I mispronunciate any kind of word. My first language is French, and this is my first conference in English, actually. So technological violence, it is a pervasive problem. We've seen a proliferation of the issues. When we look at data, we know that 70% of all domestic abuse victims report being spied on or followed or tormented by the means of technology. What we know too is that about 40% of victims have had spying software installed on their personal device. There's a concept that's called coercive control. I'm not going to have time to expand on it, but really the problem is that there's this new context when it comes to technological violence. Before, if a victim was escaping a domestic abuse situation, she would end up eventually in a safe physical space, and from there, as long as she didn't go back, she was pretty much safe. Now with technological, this kind of physical distance is reduced. There's still contact that's possible between abuser and victim, even when you're physically removed from the situation. And this has sort of created an enhanced problem. We've talked with a lot of shelters, and that's one of the issues they're seeing, where like the men would show up to the shelter to torment the victim because they could track them using different technology. So this sort of brings me to my first case. This one was one of the most complicated cases we've had to deal with at Cybercitoyen. So the way it worked was basically there was a situation. This woman, there was a violent incident, and the man was removed from the house with a no-contact agreement. But then things started escalating somehow, and she started thinking she was going insane or that the house was haunted in some manner. The thing was that the house was a fully controlled by device home, like everything connected from the floor to the lamps, just about every little thing you could think of. Every technological gadget was literally installed in this network. And it was mostly done by him, and he still had control at a distance to all of these things. So we're talking music starting in the middle of the night, heat getting super, like it's the middle of summer, and suddenly it's like 40 inside the house because all the heaters are on. There had been some incidents too, such as her being on a work computer talking to her boss, and the TV screen behind her suddenly starts playing porn at a loud volume, as a mean to eventually, obviously, disrupt her employment. There comes a time where the lawyers at that point, they start to worry he might be able to read her communication, because there had been a few incidents where he knew things he was not supposed to know. So the lawyer proposed a solution. Let's just use your work device. This way, maybe we can be safer when you talk with us. She does that. And, well, luckily, I guess in some way for her, she worked for one of the big employers. There's probably some of you actually that work there. I'm not going to name the employer though, but they have a good cybersecurity department. And basically, the guy tried to hack into the work computer, which obviously raised some red flags and sort of led a team of experts to get involved. At that point, there was actual proof that he had been trying something instead of just, because women are not really believed. Like, so she was sort of like dismissed with a lot of the things she had observed up to that point. But this was the pivot. Like, yeah, there is something going on. Someone is trying to hack into your network. So that's when we get onboarded to sort of help her clean up the whole situation. We do the standard thing. We start visiting every single device, disconnecting what we can, changing password, owning fully the telecom situation, because the thing was that he had access to the internet provider and cell phone provider because he was a co-owner. So SIM swap and all of those situations were happening. But then something still isn't working right. He still has access. He still knows things he should not know. So we do a second round of investigation, and that's when I noticed on the network, there is one connected device we had missed the first time, an Alexa. And I'm like, oh, Alexa, that wasn't there last time. What happened? Did you buy this? I knew in theory at that point that these could in theory be like retro-engineered and used for spying on people. I never had seen a concrete case, however, but let's be safe. Let's just unplug the Alexa. She doesn't have an Alexa. She's not aware of any Alexa device in the home. She doesn't like technology. She does not care for it. So we start looking across the home, and you have to picture this. We're on FaceTime. For safety reasons, I cannot physically go in the house of these people. So we're like talking on the phone. She's looking for the Alexa. She's calling the Alexa, trying to get it to voice activate. And that's when we hear the muffled sound coming from behind the dresser. We move the dresser. It's a wall. We call again. It's definitely coming from behind the wall. So I ask her, are you game? Do you have a hammer? Let's do this. We break the wall, and lo and behold, there is an Alexa that was plugged in from behind the wall that I didn't put there, we assume by him. The crazy thing about this story is not even this story in itself. It's the fact that the first time I gave this talk, the first question I got was from someone from Sécurité Québec, and they came and they told me, we just had this case a week ago. I had this exact same case. So how do two people in Quebec, which is not that much people really, somehow end up having the same idea that is so crazy and out there? Well, that brings us to talk about the spyfluencer problem, because yes, that's a thing. So there are forums of discussion where people discuss the strategies on how to stalk and spy and essentially harass these people. You can go, like some of them are on subreddits, hidden subreddits. You're gonna have to like find them eventually, but some of them are really out in the open, such as YouTube. So if you go on YouTube and you talk and you ask question, how to spy on my girlfriend, you're gonna be proposed a whole set of videos. So the thing with spyfluencers is some of them are a bit more hidden in their agenda. They're talking about how to keep your children safe by using spyware devices on their phone. Some of them are just straight to the point, how to spy on your girlfriend in case she's a stupid cheater, and they're gonna give you like a review of all the best apps you can use to do it, and step-by-step guides on how to actually install the software on her phone. And that's one of the problems. It does not require high skills nowadays to have these kind of attacks done on someone else. You can just follow a guide that's fairly easy to use. These videos, some of them, they have millions of views. It's very scary. There's also for the youth, in case you have kids, there's a whole like spy talk happening too. And on those, there are influencers that are glamorizing the concept of covert surveillance as sort of being a loving and caring thing to do in the relationship, and they're framing it that way. And that's like a whole other issue. There has been a normalizing of surveillance, especially in intimate relationships. We see a lot with kids, they talk to each other, and the concept of if you love me, you're gonna give me access to your phone. If you truly love me, I'm gonna be able to read all your messages. We're gonna share password. We're gonna be able to track each other's location. That's love. And they didn't learn that just in school or from spy talk. They learned it from their parents that have been using spyware on their device to track them in the name of protection. That's a whole lot of discussion. I know if you are a parent, maybe you're triggered by what I just said, because of course you're tracking your children's location. It's for safety, right? But this sort of thing has created an expectation that when someone loves you, they track you in some manner. And that's a very dangerous mindset when these kids end up in their early teenagehood and they live their first relationship. So coming back to the situation of domestic abuse and spyware, I've talked about like the spyware software you can download online. Of course, these are sketchy sometimes, but you don't even need to go there. You can just weaponize legitimate tools and apps that actually exist on the market. I'm thinking Find My Phone. I'm thinking the app you use to monitor your baby when he goes to sleep. The hair tags, we've seen a lot of cases with air tags being slipped in purse, on their cars, in children's backpack to track where people are going. It is now actually a very real danger for shelter, because when victims come in with their bags and everything, they literally have to look at everything just in case an air tag slipped their way into the bags while they were trying to escape. So these tracking apps that are designed for legitimate purposes, well, when they're used in a weaponized manner, we call them dual use. And that's been another whole problem that we've had. I mean, the Alexa case, this was not an illegal tool. It was literally something you can buy. And there's tons of objects too that exist in that sort of gray zone and mass market situation. I know there was one of the vendors, they're having a draw for an OMG cable. These are the kind of tools that can be used, right? But again, someone that's not working in cybersecurity might not know this exists. You don't need an OMG cable. You can just go on Amazon, Google spy clock, and have a large variety of objects from clock to teddy bear to actually spy on people. You can use your Amazon Ring. You can use connected device. All of this can be used to track people. So what do we do when the threat actor actually still has access to our personal information, our home, our devices, or maybe those of our children? Well, most victims, what they're going to do is that they're going to go online. They're going to Google, what do I do? And they're going to try to reach for some help. However, that's when the issue comes where most of the advice actually don't apply for people in this particular scenario. In an ideal world, when you're thinking about your cybersecurity, you control your device, right? You are able to protect it. There's nobody that has a physical access to it except you. You also expect some sort of basic privacy to start with. That's been a challenge. How do I talk to someone that have their whole communication potentially tracked by someone? How do I communicate safely? That's really hard. Sometimes what we've been doing is sort of disguising our call as a lunch and learn mandatory work webinar, and sort of having this happen so that we can disguise, and if someone comes in the room and asks, what are you doing? It's a mandatory work training about cybersecurity, so boring. But that's the kind of things we have to do to sort and try to communicate, and that's a challenge. This can also mean some steps can trigger alarm. When you delete one of those spyware, usually they send an alarm to the person. Hey, the app has been deleted. If you change your password and your abuser has the expectation that he can connect at any time to your account, that's also going to raise some red flags if suddenly he can't. So these are all problems that actually don't really get accounted for when you Google basic cybersecurity tips and tricks on the internet. The last step is I also assume you have good tech literacy. We're talking people, sometimes they're much older, they're scared, they're in a life or death situation, quite literally, and they never had an interest in tech before they actually were faced with this emergency. It's a lot to learn suddenly about that. I remember there was this survey about how do we feel about cybersecurity as experts in the industry, and the conclusion was that even for an expert, cybersecurity was overwhelming a lot of times. So if experts that spend their day, maybe their weekend like we are today, are overwhelmed with cybersecurity practice at times, how can we expect someone in a life or death situation that never had any kind of time spent in learning any of these to suddenly not feel extremely overwhelmed? There's the Quebec problem too. Most of these resources are also in English, and in Quebec, most of us speak French. So that's another layer. You have to find help in another language on top of things. More specifically, the problem with password, again, like set up a good password, don't tell it to anyone. That's not a good advice. Maybe they're forced into giving that password to someone. Maybe the accounts are straight up shared together. We've all seen those like couple Facebook accounts, right? They're kind of cringy, but like they can be very dangerous in the context where one of the person in this relationship is actually abusive. Who set up the password? We've had situations where basically what happened was that the woman had delegated all of her technological life to her husband up to that point. Kind of like with the bank account back in the days where, like, let's say in the couple, the man had taken care of the bank account all his life, he passes away, and then the woman is faced with the situation that she doesn't know how to pay the bill, she doesn't know which banks they're using. This used to be a really big problem, but now we're facing this problem with technological and abuse case. There's also secret questions, elephant in the room here. Someone who knows you intimately, someone who's married to you, probably knows the name of your first pet. Like that probably has come up at some point in the conversation. So most of the protection in your systems are not valid. Another protection that's not valid is the multi-factor authentication. If they have physical access to the device, they can see the notification. You don't even need to unlock the phone most of the time. If the Bell account or the Videotron account, whatever cell phone provider you're using, is shared, they can probably change your SIM card easily. They have the password, they have the account number, they're co-owner. So that means, again, all those SMS notifications are basically useless in this context. The Authenticator app, if there's a spyware installed, they can probably see the screen as you open the Authenticator app. Again, not very safe. And in the end, if there's a compromised primary email, it's often the case. It's connected on the main home computer. Everyone has access to it. So getting that code from the email, again, very, very easy. Same apply with the password manager. It's not safe in this context. It's often a family account. Everyone has access to everything. Again, the main email is often compromised. Even if in the most technological conscious people that we help, they will usually have an iCloud password manager or Google password manager. And again, it becomes a catastrophic situation because the main email is compromised and literally all the passwords are linked to it. And they have access to potentially the physical unlocked device, so that's not helpful. Usually what we're going to recommend in those cases is to get sort of a burner phone, but that also comes with another set of problems that I'm going to talk about in not too long. So I've mentioned, obviously, even the communications are difficult. How do I give my advice? How do I help the person if I cannot talk to them safely? Same with the lawyers. That's a problem they're facing quite often. They're trying to talk with their clients, sensitive information that is important for the due process, and they can't. So we have to set up sort of this whole paper password, passphrases, setting up like questions to identify the person. I've had a case where I was setting up for a call, a fake work webinar again, and as I'm connecting, I'm noticing the person doesn't talk to me, she's just connected, she's chatting, but she's not speaking out loud, and the camera is not on, and I'm kind of worried because it's weird. I'm like, usually she has her mic, usually she talks to me, so I ask her, oh, are you okay? Is your mic not working? And I get the answer, no. And I don't know, in this moment, I had a little red flag in my heart. So I asked the secret question we've had set. I'm not going to say what it was exactly, but let's say it was, oh, I forgot, how do you take your coffee already? And the person answered, 2 sugar, 2 milk. But that was a trick question, because the right answer was blue and yellow. So I knew immediately in that moment I was not speaking to the person I was supposed to be speaking, and I had the strong assumption that it was probably the ex-partner trying to see what was this about. So I played it off with a work webinar. Started off like, oh, so I feel like someone canceled the meeting. Maybe we can postpone this. Like, I really want everyone to be there for this important work meeting. So let's just do something. But this is a challenge we have to manage in this context. It's not easy. And then there's all the other things we don't necessarily think about. I've talked about the burner phone situation. Then what happens if there's an Amber Alert and your secret phone that's stashed in a drawer actually rings in the middle of the night? That can pose a problem. How do you explain, yeah, I have this secret phone you never knew about while we share every other single device that we own in our life? So this is something we have to take into consideration. And then there's the issues of like, how do we explain things people don't even know exist? When we meet with people, sometimes they're worried about a bunch of things, but they don't necessarily go to the conclusion, I have a spyware in my phone, because they don't even know that's a thing. So there's this whole situation where we have to also meet them where they are at, technological-wise. I remember the first time I talked about this, someone commented on LinkedIn, oh, it's so easy, just tell them to install a VM on their machine and scan their phone. I'm not going to say that to Jeanette, 55 years old, who has never touched tech in her whole life before. She doesn't know about this. She knows if her phone, however, is acting weird. Is it glitchy? Is it hot? Do you have a higher data bill than usual? These signs that are easy to explain can give us more information than asking her to do some elaborate process that is just not accessible for someone who doesn't have tech backgrounds. So that's like a whole other thing. Like, we have to sort of adjust the expectation of communication, and sometimes the good enough solution is not going to be perfect, but that's all that we have to help. There's also the concept of burden of proof. Some of these cases, they have law implication. Most, like 99.9% of the cases we've had to deal with was on civil court law level. And one of the problems we've had is that women cannot accuse their ex-partner of spying on them without potentially facing retaliation if they cannot support their claim. Because if they say, oh, he's spying on me, he's harassing me, and they cannot back it up, then it gets flipped on them, and they get accused of family alienation. And they can actually lose their children in that context. However, lucky for us, in the context of civil court, the proof has to be convincing. Disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. This is what the lawyer told me, and I'm like sort of sharing back the information. It's not exact, it's approximative, but basically you have to be convincing. So going here and being like, hi, I'm an expert, I teach at Polytechnique. I think there is something going on here that is definitely sketchy. And you can prove with journaling sometimes of instance. You know, like when we fight with your landlord, you can just track all the instance, and that's good enough proof. It's kind of similar in this context. So all the little incidents that accumulate into something that looks actually worrying. Criminal court is a whole other problem, and there's the whole issue with spyware that it's really hard to prove in an irrefutable way who installed this app on the phone, because usually you need physical access to the phone to install it. And the first question is, how do we know it's not her who installed it on herself to make him look bad? Yeah, I don't know how to prove that. Exactly. So how do we help people? Just quickly, we've established like this whole process. It's not perfect, but usually we start with a questionnaire just to assess the situation. Obviously, for legal reason, when it's really urgent, we have to ask them to contact the police instead of actually going to us. We're volunteers. It's just me and Sam. We're two people. We cannot help everyone in a very fast timeline. So when there's an urgent situation, they sadly have to go find help somewhere else. We also ask often if there's children involved. When there's children, the surface of attack is so much greater. And then you have to try and convince a teenager that he cannot bring his phone when he visits his dad for safety reason. And that's really complicated. Obviously, the last question is always, well, what are the devices being used? Just because basic IT support tech, I'm not going to do the same thing on an Android that I'm going to do on an Apple. It's two different ecosystems. Then we go to the process. I'll leave it there. I'm not going to explain it too much just because it's really long to explain, and I feel like I'm running out of time already. But basically, we do the follow-up, we chat up with them, we do scans, and we give them homeworks because we cannot cover everything in a single 30 minutes, hour-long call. The homeworks is going to look a little bit like this. So this is something called this disconnection checklist. So basically the way it works is that all these apps and tools and accounts that we have that we don't necessarily think, if you want that, we can send you the link, don't worry, it's like in French and translated and everything and updated. But really, it like, for example, the Uber Eats account. Let's say you're safe, you managed to disconnect yourself, you forgot you shared your Uber Eats account with someone, and then you order yourself food. Well, you might have just given your location away. So these kind of things are important to consider, and they're very long to do, so usually we give that out as homeworks. Then I know Faraday baggers sort of like looked a bit with disdain in the community because they're not that useful in many contexts. But in the context of technological abuse, they're actually a very real way you can protect yourself. That burner phone can be kept safe in a drawer with those. When the kids go visit their dads and they've had issues with the phone being sort of like hacked while they were there, we can deal with it. You cannot tell a teen, don't bring your phone, but you can deal with them. Okay, leave it in the bag, but bring your phone. And then that's sort of a compromise that works for teenagers, and this way keeps the family safe also afterward. So I could talk on and on about this. There's so many things to consider. It's such a challenge. Obviously, there's a whole police problem with that. We've had cases where the police has been helpful. There's been cases where the police has been less than helpful. The problem really is that the law enforcement is not totally equipped right now. There's a whole problem of awareness when it comes to this situation. We've had a victim come up to them with this whole issues and being told by the police in charge, you listen to too many movies. Want us to call your husband so we can pick you up from the station? After being concerned that the guy was trying to kill her. So what do we need? Why am I doing this today? Well, I've said it. We need the community help. This is an issue that's growing. There's not enough resources. There's not enough knowledge about this. It's a very particular cases. And there's not enough frameworks. There's not enough experts. There's not enough volunteers. We just need help, tools. If you're into programming and hacking, there's a CETA tool. So CETA is a clinic in the university that has a tool for scanning easily phones. It hasn't been updated in years. Maybe it needs to be updated. Maybe it needs to be scrapped completely and redone. I don't know. This is not my field of expertise, but maybe some of you would have the tools for that. So just as a quick conclusion, cybersecurity in this context is not just a technological challenge. It's literally about empowering the survival of these victims. And I really hope that as a community, we can build the tools and design the processes to truly make a difference for those people. Thank you.